The miracle of the stranger who changed everything. The town of Hillcrest had always been quiet, tucked away in a valley, where the world outside seemed to move too fast. Time was slower here, and life moved at the pace of the seasons. For Emily, a young woman with dreams that reached far beyond the small, sleepy town, it felt like a cage. Her father, Henry, had passed away a year ago, leaving her to take care of their family-owned bookstore, a place that had been the family for generations. Though she tried to keep things running smoothly, the bookstore was struggling. People were no longer coming in. The shelves, once brimming with novels, histories, and poetry, seemed to gather dust as time wore on. Emily's heart was heavy with the weight of her father's absence, the store's slow decline, and a relentless feeling of being stuck. One chilly evening in early autumn, Emily sat at the counter, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of her, staring out at the streetlights flickering in the dusk. She had nearly closed up for the night when the doorbell chimed, a sound that usually meant the end of her long shift. A man entered the bookstore, his appearance unremarkable, gray wool coat, unshaven, tired eyes, but there was something in the way he moved, a certain calmness. His gaze fell on the rows of books, the air of nostalgia that hung in the room. Without speaking, he wandered to the back of the store and began flipping through the old novels, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. Emily watched him, her curiosity piqued. It was rare for someone to simply wander in like this. "Can I help you with anything?" she finally asked. He turned to face her, his eyes thoughtful, as though measuring her words. "I'm just looking," he said quietly, his voice deep but soft, as if he had a secret he wasn't quite ready to share. Emily nodded, unsure whether to continue the conversation or leave him be. The last thing she wanted was another awkward interaction. But something about him seemed familiar, even though she knew she'd never seen him before. After a few minutes, the man turned and walked toward the counter. He held a tattered, leather-bound book in his hands, one Emily had never noticed before. It was old, the edges frayed, and the cover was nearly worn off. "Where did you find this?" Emily asked, surprised. She'd worked in this store for years and had cataloged every book at least twice. The man smiled gently. "I've been here before a long time ago. You might not remember me, but I remember this place." The words sent a shiver down Emily's spine. She felt an inexplicable connection to him, even though he wasn't saying much. And then he did something strange. He opened the book, turned to the first page, and began reading aloud. The stories we tell ourselves are never as important as the ones that choose us. His voice was soothing, like a forgotten melody, and the words seemed to resonate deep within her. Emily took a deep breath, trying to make sense of what was happening. "I know that quote," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "You should," the man said with a smile. "It's from a story that hasn't been written yet, but you're going to finish it." Emily frowned, her head spinning. "What are you talking about? What do you mean, finish it?" The man closed the book and placed it in her hands. "Sometimes we need to finish what others started, or what we started long ago. You'll know what to do." With that, he turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the stillness of the store. But just before he reached the door, he paused, glancing over his shoulder. "Don't give up on this place," he said, his voice low. "It's more important than you think." Before Emily could respond, the door shut with a soft click, leaving her standing in the middle of the store, clutching the mysterious book. For the next few weeks, the bookstore became her refuge, and that book became her obsession. She pored over its pages. Strangely, they weren't filled with words at all. Instead, they were blank except for the occasional symbol or drawing. There were no dates, no names. But slowly, she began to piece together a story, one that felt incredibly familiar. It was her story, and yet it was a version of herself she hadn't realized was possible. The more she read, the more her vision of the bookstore began to change. Ideas flowed to her like a river she had once been too afraid to cross. She started hosting local events, children's story hours, poetry readings, author signings. People started to notice again. The bookstore came alive, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. But Emily never forgot the stranger. No one in town ever remembered him. She asked everyone she could, but no one had seen him before. He was a ghost, a phantom who had appeared out of nowhere and left behind a story that gave her the strength to rebuild. One evening, after another successful event, Emily stood at the counter, the store buzzing with people. Her heart felt full in a way it hadn't in years. That's when she looked up and saw him again, standing by the door, just like before. He gave her a small, knowing smile. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." The man didn't respond. He just nodded and turned to leave, his figure disappearing into the fading light of the evening. And this time, Emily didn't wonder if he was real. She knew the answer. He was a miracle, a stranger who had stayed just long enough to change everything. Sometimes, the right person appears when you least expect it, not to stay forever, but to help you find the strength you already had.